Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Creepy Horror Stories, Tech Scary Chat Stories. It's a really fun little app available on Google Play. So what you do is after you download it, you select horror, fantasy, comedy, or whichever category you'd like. And within these categories are the different types of stories you can play through. It's all like a text conversation between people. I really enjoyed it. It really helps build up the suspense. If you don't believe me, try it out. I seriously think it's really good. If any of you would like to get it, feel free to check it out. You can find the link in the description, and as I said, it's absolutely free. I really think that a lot of you guys will actually enjoy it. So think about it. Link in the description. It could probably be quite fun to do after this video is over, or when you have a spare moment, like on the bus or anything like that. Alright guys, but without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is the story of why I stopped taking the late bus from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia's capital city, to Kajang. It happened a few decades ago, long before they built a metro system that connects Kuala Lumpur and Kajang and smaller places beyond it. At the time, I was involved in a centralized training for the spot I competed in. I was in the state team, which was training at the center in Kuala Lumpur. The training sometimes went on a little longer than usual, which meant I would have to take the late bus to get home. The bus from Pudaraya, now called Pudu Central Station, at 10 p.m, and arrived at Kajang town just before 11. I would then take a different bus home. This bus left Kajang town at 11, and this meant I would get home just before midnight. Thankfully, the team only trained 3 times a week. On this fateful night, I had to take the 10 o'clock bus. That night, it rained, which meant that most people stayed home and didn't go out. It also meant that the working people tried their best to leave for home as early as possible, so that they could avoid the traffic jams that would happen if the rainwater flooded the road anywhere along it. When I got on the bus, there were only about a dozen other people on the bus, and we were all wet. We sat in our respective seats and tried not to shiver when the bus started moving and the cold night air came through the open window. This was the days before we had air-conditioned buses playing this route. Some resorted to closing the windows, but this would only make the bus stuffy, so we braved the wind and the occasional drops of water. I had my martial arts uniform under my jacket anyway, so the cold didn't bother me that much. The bus ride was normal and quiet. The bus stopped at the housing estates along the route, and by the time the bus reached Cheras, which was about 7 kilometers from Purayada, all the other passengers had alighted, leaving me alone on the bus with the driver. At one stop, the bus stopped, and the last passenger alighted. Then a young woman hopped on. I was not looking in her direction when she came on, because I was staring at the traffic jam on the other side of the road. I was thankful that our side was a lot clearer. When I turned from the window, I saw the young woman walk past me. She was gorgeous, dressed in an old-style Malay dress called the baju kurung, and what struck me later was she was completely dry. When she walked past me, I caught a whiff of her sweet-smelling flower perfume. She sat in the last few rows of seats. The bus continued on its trajectory. I found myself turning in my seat to look at this woman, and I could not help myself. She was by far the most beautiful young woman I had ever seen. I just couldn't keep my eyes off her. A few minutes later, she seemed to notice that she was being watched. She looked up, directly at me, and smiled. This smile made me feel embarrassed, but made her look even more radiant. As the bus approached my destination, I fought the urge to approach her to introduce myself. As it started to draw into the Kajang terminal, I resolved that I might as well introduce myself when we left the bus. I was hoping that I could get to know her. If it meant I had to walk her home, so be it. The bus pulled in. I got up and made my way to the exit. I thought I would get off the bus, then wait for her to get off as well and say hello. My plan was genius. When I got off, I saw that no one was exiting after me. I went to the door, up the steps to look around, but she wasn't there. Where did she go? I asked the bus driver who was busy packing up. Who? He replied. The girl who sat behind me? He looked at me. You were the only one on the bus, my friend. I thanked him, got off the bus, then surveyed the almost deserted bus terminal. She was gone. I sighed, then made my way to the bus station that went to my area. It belonged to a different bus company. The image of her face never left my mind. I intentionally took the 10 o'clock bus the next few times I had training at the capital, just to be able to see her again, to no avail. It was a month or so later when I found myself waiting for the bus to Kuala Lumpur at the same bus station. I sat on a bench to get some refreshments, and one of the company's bus drivers sat on the bench beside me. Going to Kuala Lumpur? He asked. I confirmed, and we started chatting, killing time. Then I mentioned that I saw a young woman. It was at this point the man interrupted me. Very beautiful, long black shoulder-length hair, wearing a light green kurung dress. You know her? I knew her, he corrected me. Then he told me that she was a regular on the 10 o'clock bus when he used to drive it years earlier. He noticed her because of her beauty also. One night, she took the 10 o'clock bus when the bus was empty save for her. She rang the bell at a housing estate a couple of stops before Kajang town. He stopped the bus and she got off. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. He said they found her body in a ditch across the road from where he left her. Investigations revealed that she was the victim of a hit and run. The driver was never caught. However, he added that about 2 years after the incident, a car was found in the same ditch one morning, the driver dead. The local people who found the driver reported saying that the man's face was contorted in a look of utter terror. I still took the 10 o'clock bus for the duration of my training program, with the hope I would see the woman again, but sadly, I never did. I was on my way back home from the city centre, and I had a sandwich with me. I have to take this bus to get home, and it's about 16 stops until I arrive. Usually, it's only me, and sometimes one other person that gets off at my stop. I got on the bus at the back door. This was roughly 9 p.m. And the minute I sat down, this drunk guy comes to me and asks if I speak Hungarian. There are a lot of beggars in this area, and I'm not surprised, and I say no, even though I can. He then starts speaking to me in English and asks if I can give him money or food. I haven't got any Hungarian currency on me, I say. This is a lie, because I just wanted to eat my damn sandwich. The guy then proceeds to signal me to give him a piece of my sandwich, and almost breaks a piece off, so I say, sorry dude, no offense, I want to eat my food. At first he seems pretty chill about it, but then it gets interesting. He sits back on his seat 3 rows behind. I notice he's not alone. He's with another 2 equally drunk gentlemen. The bus now closes its doors and starts. As I'm eating my sandwich, I hear these guys talking crap about me in Hungarian, assuming I don't understand it. Man, this twat won't give me a piece of his sandwich. Man, I could bash his head in with a glass, I'm so angry. I hear them agreeing on getting down at my stop so they can beat me up. I never had to deal with a situation like this. So I started to think and came to the conclusion that my best option was to get down at my stop and run home. Not the usual route, like hell, because I can easily outrun 3 30-year-old drunk guys. Meanwhile, I'm forced to focus on what to do, and I don't even touch my sandwich. This got them even angrier. He isn't even finishing the sandwich. I bet he gets home and throws it in the garbage. Then one of them said, he murdered someone in his dreams. The other one said he dreamt the same thing too, and that this isn't a coincidence. I'm there like, surely they aren't that barbaric. But I was wrong. I hear the three discussing my height, weight, buffness, and agree that they can easily take me on 3-on-1. At this point, I'm sweating and thinking about other options because my stop is coming up and we're heading into the suburbs. The bus is starting to get empty. Then I realized I could pretend that I got off somewhere and hope they do, so I decided to do that. At the last relatively busy bus stop before my stop, I stood up and went to the front door where 4 other people stood waiting to get off. The bus stops and I start to go towards the door, but stop when they can't see me. Surprise, surprise, they got off. The guy starts walking to my door calmly because there were other people at the stop. But when he got to my door, luckily it closed. I checked if anyone got off with me at my stop though. I think this could have gone much, much worse. So I was lucky to get the best case scenario. Who knows what those guys would have been capable of? And for all of those of you who were asking, I did finish the rest of the sandwich at home. This happened to me at around 8 p.m. about a year ago. As soon as I get on the bus, I notice this guy sitting in the front. Seems and looks like a normal dude, like he's just finished a long day's work. When I find a seat by the window near the back, that same guy moves to a seat in front of me, which was also giving him a clear view of me. I was wondering why, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. However, there was something about this entire situation that just didn't seem right. So I begin watching him from the reflection on the window. I see that he's staring at me, and when I look in his direction, he looks away. He then proceeds to look out the window, rummaging through his bags, drinks some Gatorade, applies some Vaseline onto his hands, and basically trying to come off as inconspicuous as possible. Yet there was something about the way his feet were positioned, how he was constantly doing something and obviously him looking at me, that didn't settle quite right with me. The stop I was planning on getting off at is in a relatively quiet part of the city, and I'd have to walk a bit to get to my destination. With businesses already closed, there'd be no one around besides cars zooming by. So at the very last minute, I decide to get off in a much more busy area, like I predicted. He catches me from the corner of his eye, requesting the driver stop, and starts getting ready to leave. I'm slow to alight, and so is he, and I look at him, and so is he. Since the stop is directly in front of a train station, I prayed that he was just going to walk there, and that would be the end of this. Of course, no. There's a good distance between us on the street, but he puts his bags down and pretends to be rummaging through them, but still has his eye on me. I stay where I am, because another bus at that same stop was going to come soon that would take me closer to my destination, and watch him from the corner of my eye. A few minutes pass and he walks away. I notice him getting on a streetcar and block down, and I can finally breathe. I see my bus coming, and I am just so relieved. I look back in his direction one last time, and notice that he got off the streetcar and is just standing there. I hurry into the bus and pray that he doesn't run to get in. He doesn't, and I get to my destination safely, even though the bus driver completely skips over my stop for some reason, but whatever. I just want to let you guys know that you should seriously be aware of your surroundings and always question. Normal-looking people can be suspicious as hell. Had I not first walked into the bus and noticed him change seats, I don't know what would have happened to me that night. I was about 16 at the time. I rode the public bus to and from school. This particular day, I had done some special effects makeup before the end of my classes, so I had fake blood running down my face, and I couldn't be bothered to take it off before leaving school. Now I knew I was boarding my bus, people would stare and ask questions, so I wasn't surprised when this man, who looked to be in his mid-30s, started asking about the makeup. The conversation was normal at first, just the usual, "Oh wow, did you do that yourself?" kind of stuff. I answered the question as I normally would and expected the conversation to be done and over with. Boy, was I wrong. This man, who he mentioned his name was Joe, started steering the conversation into strange territory, asking me if I had a boyfriend, to which I lied and said I did. He then proceeded to ask if my boyfriend liked the makeup and if I was on my way to see him now. I lied and said he did and that I was in fact going to go see him, trying to get Joe to believe someone was expecting me. The conversation died down for a bit until he says, "You know, you remind me a lot of my sister," he said with a grin. I just smiled in response, not really knowing what to say. After not hearing anything from Joe, he continued, "My sister was kind of a bitch. She was always lying about me to our parents. I had fantasies of breaking her jaw." Now, at this point, I was terrified. My bus stop was still another 20 minutes away, and I just wanted to be out of this situation. Seeing that what he said made me uncomfortable, he switched subjects, telling me about where he worked and what he does there. I just nodded along with what he was saying, remaining silent the entire time. Closer to my bus stop, he says, "Don't you want to come to my house? I have a freezer full of pizza and ice cream. Maybe we can hang out for a while." To which I politely decline, saying my boyfriend was expecting me. Finally, I get off my bus stop and quickly get off the bus, speed walking all the way home, all the while calling a friend to inform them of what happened. Things were fine for a bit after that. I switched my bus route so I wouldn't run into him again. But one afternoon, I had to go to a store that was on my old route. I was nervous about getting on that bus again, but was happy when I didn't see Joe. I did my shopping, and just as I was leaving the store, I saw Joe standing out by the doors staring at me. The second I was out the doors, he walked over to me, grin on his face, and wrapped his arms around me. I pulled him away from me, telling him I was very busy and had to go. He then asks, "Well, what are you doing?" "I have time. I can tag along." I was very persistent, saying that I really couldn't and that I had to go, and walked away, heading into a neighboring store that I knew would be busy. Sure enough, Joe followed. I ignored him as I made my way down a heavily populated makeup aisle, keeping my attention on some cheap lipsticks in the hopes he'd get the hint and leave me alone. I was wrong. Joe reached over my shoulder, grabbing a red lipstick as he leaned in close and whispered, "The color would look gorgeous on you. I can't wait to see you wearing it." He then put the lipstick in my basket and walked away, leaving the store. I remained in the store for about 20 minutes after his departure, afraid to leave and make the walk home. After I mustered up the courage, I put the lipstick back, put away the basket, and called a friend to stay on the line with me until I made it home. Now I don't know if he followed me or not, but I can say that after that day, the motion detector porch light started coming on at night an awful lot, and I started hearing knocks at my bedroom window. Thankfully, I moved shortly after, and haven't seen Joe since. My sister, 4 years younger than me, who must have been around 14 at the time, and myself, used to be huge anime nerds, and I mean huge. We had gone to a couple of conventions before, but always accompanied by my mum, who I think was more than a little embarrassed by the amount of crappy Japanese that was spoken. So when the next convention rolled in, and I asked to be the responsible adult to accompany my sister, she was more than happy to let us go, as long as we came back early and kept in touch. We were thrilled. That con was happening in our city's WTC, which happened to be opposite to where we lived, at least a 2-hour trip on public transport. We packed our stuff, including our cosplay, and took a bus to the subway. Halfway along the trip, we had to change transport once again and take the subway bus, a bus that had defined stations like the subway because it was the only way to get there. So we hopped off the subway and made our way to the new station. Now the spot where the subway and subbus met is a round plaza that has always been very busy. The subway entrance is in the middle and the subbus goes around it, so you had to cross it in order to get to the station itself. We had just walked out of the subway when suddenly this teenage-looking guy passes next to us and asks us the time. He seemed a bit shifty, and my spider senses immediately tingled off. Since a few weeks back, I was almost robbed with this same tactic. But before I could say anything, my sister pulled out her cell phone, told him the time, and he walked off. "It's okay, girl. He just probably wanted to know the time. He didn't necessarily wanted to know if you had valuables to try and steal them," I assured myself as we made our way in between the people. But when I casually turned around, the guy was following us. He was probably taking the same bus, I thought, but my mind was already in alert mode. I didn't want to scare my sister, who was, thankfully, oblivious to what was going on. So I began to make a really long trip round the plaza to see maybe if I was just paranoid and he'd take a different route. But he stayed behind us and seemed to be getting closer. The subbus usually has cops on the entrance, and I figured that if we managed to get there quickly, he wouldn't be able to do anything to us. But I feared that he would try to rip the bag off my sister to keep her cell phone. So as casually as I could, I told her to put her bag in front of her and run to the subbus and call the cop when I told her to. She looked at me like I was crazy. She still hadn't realized that we were being followed, but complied, and as we approached the stairs to the subbus, I saw the guy quicken his pace and told her to go. She ran up the stairs, and the guy tried to catch up to us, and I turned around and confronted him, blocking the way to my sister. I am in no way an intimidating person. I'm 5'2", extremely slim. I'm wearing my geekiest clothes, cat sweatshirt with ears included, so I'm sure I wouldn't even have scared a Care Bear. But I guess the guy didn't expect me to turn and face him with my meanest face, which I must say resembles SpongeBob angry, or that my sister would be out of his reach so quickly. He looked at me, turned around, and disappeared between the mass of people. Nobody even noticed that he had been pursuing us, nor my act of bravery. Thinking in retrospect, I'm lucky he wasn't violent or armed. He could have taken me down in 2 seconds. I felt proud of myself and sister, and was grateful. The cops didn't even bother looking for the guy when we told him, because there are so many little thefts in the area, and he technically hadn't done anything wrong yet. We managed to arrive to our convention safely and had a blast. So to the kid that tried to rob my sister, back off, or I'll scare you with my Star Wars shirt and poor vision. I go to college in the city, but I live a few miles outside of it, and therefore catch a bus to and from college every day. After finishing at college today, I caught my bus home. At the bus station, a family of 5 people got on. There was a girl, her mother and father, I'm assuming, and another older couple, who I took to be one of the parents. During the bus journey, for whatever reason, the girl kept turning around and looking at me, not smiling or saying anything, just looking at me. I didn't pay attention, and I just carried on looking through my phone. During the journey, they all seemed to be talking and laughing amongst each other. Now my bus goes through some very rural areas. Think country roads with the occasional house between a couple of small towns. At some point, the father just gets up without saying anything and walks downstairs to get off the bus at a stop in the middle of nowhere. The only thing in sight is a small gravel path that maybe led to a house or farm of some kind. After this, the rest of them followed and went downstairs at the next stop, but only the older couple got off and started walking backwards towards where the father would have gotten off. Again, nothing around but a few houses, although in the opposite direction to the pair walked, but the girl and her mother did not get off. Now, me being me, was a little curious about this, so I kept looking out of the window to see what was going on, as the bus stopped for a few minutes here, but it started up again without the girl and her mother getting off. For the rest of my journey, I kept looking out the window at each end just to satisfy my curiosity, but they still didn't get off the bus. My stop is at the end of the line for the bus, and the upper level was all empty at this point. I walked downstairs at the end of my journey to get off, and they were nowhere to be seen. Without any shadow of a doubt, they didn't get off the bus at any of the stops, and weren't on the bus at the end of the journey. I was sat in the back of the bus on the left-hand window seat, and you can see the front of the bus and doors from my seat. There were no other doors to the bus, so they couldn't have left the bus on another side or anything. I didn't turn my attention or anything, as for the most of the journey I had my earphones in, and was just looking out the window for the most part. If anyone has any explanations, please share. I've been really weirded out by this. I go to school, and it's about an hour away on the bus. So I take the same bus every single day to get to school. Well, today, I was on my way to school and we stopped at one bus stop that's kind of in the middle of nowhere in between my city and another city, which isn't even that far, about a 10-minute drive. A man is at the bus stop. He's got a bike. So he puts it on the front of the bus where there's a little bike holder, and the man gets on. I'm sitting near the back of the bus and I notice him get on, and when I see that he has scars and scratches all over his face and bruises too. Parts of his face were covered in bandages, but otherwise he looked like your typical dude of 5'7" and wearing a hat and sunglasses, a white shirt and shorts. So when he gets on the bus, he seems to be rummaging through his bag for bus fare. I don't think much of this, but for some reason I have this strange feeling to keep my eye on him. I notice as he's walking towards the back of the bus that he is placing his hands in his pocket and staring at me very sharply, like a sort of smirk on his face. As he's walking past, I then notice he smells me, like deeply inhales my hair as he's walking past me. At this point, I completely get creeps. The man sits directly behind me. I'm not a big person. I'm female at approximately 5'5" and in my early 20s. I'm roughly 130 pounds. And right now, it's almost summer. I'm wearing a nice cropped down shirt and some light pants. My neck is fully exposed. I then notice he is just leaning forwards enough for me to see that he is staring directly at me. He had his hands in his pocket and was clearly holding something that he wanted no one to see in his hand. This makes me think back a few years to a man who was released from a prison/rehab for cutting off someone's head on the Greyhound and then trying to eat them. I'm sure you've heard of it. If not, look it up. With this thought, I moved quickly to the front of the bus, just as it was coming up to the next stop. I sat with the driver and started talking, and that man got off the bus at the next stop. Passing me again by the driver, he leans in and smells me, and grabs his bag and leaves. He was only on the bus for a stop or two. Couldn't he have just used his bike? I'm glad I didn't end up with my ear in some dude's pocket. This happened on Wednesday night, when I had just finished my shift at work. It was after 10 p.m. I had been drinking the night before in my wine and video game night, and was still feeling the backlash in my stomach. I couldn't eat all day, and now I had a deep hunger. So I decided to grab a meal from McDonald's, since I wanted to have time to eat my food. Because it was a pleasant night, I walked up to the bus stop at the other end of the retail park where I worked. I reached the stop and noticed this older woman already sitting there, which kind of irked me, since I liked this stop due to the fact it was normally empty and I could be alone. I guess that wasn't happening tonight, so I just sit down at the other end of the bench and continue eating. After a few minutes, I look up to see that the bus was approaching and accidentally lock eyes with the woman. She was staring intently, and my natural instinct was just to give her a quick smile and look away. But that seemed to make her think that it was okay to come and approach me and sit down next to me, pulling my headphones so they sat around my neck. Wow, rude. Shaken, I just stared at her until she grinned and spoke. Long night, eh? Working hard? Yeah. Where do you work? I tell her a lie, and she starts asking me all these questions. Do I like it? Have I worked there long? And I do the usual tactic of short but polite answers. I look again to check for the bus, and suddenly feel her cold fingers on the inside of my bare forearm, my hoodie sleeves rolled up due to the nice weather. Wow, your skin is so soft, she exclaimed while running her fingers up and down. Yeah, my skin's pretty smooth, but that doesn't mean you should touch it. I really don't like being touched. I kinda just stare at her in disbelief for a few seconds, until she starts speaking excitedly. Yeah, really smooth. Are your legs smooth? Your back? Let me touch your neck and your face. Luckily, at that point I saw my bus approaching, and without saying a word to her, I flagged it down and got on. She didn't follow me, but the weird thing is she looked totally unremarkable, so I wasn't wary of her at all. But you can bet I didn't go back to that stop for the next few nights. I'd like to keep my skin, thank you very much. This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was 18. I'm female and was in my second week of college. Our school had off-campus buildings where classes were often held, so small buses packed with students and professors going back and forth was common. The ride to these buildings were about an hour long. The buses were set up not like a school bus with the seats in pairs, but with the seats going around the interior of the bus facing inwards. Anyway, I was sitting on the bus ready to head back to the main campus from my class. A man in his mid-30s wearing a suit entered the bus shortly after me and asked where I was going. I told him, and he nodded and sat down next to me since it was only one of a few seats that were left. Since the trip was an hour long, pretty much everyone fell asleep, and it was normal because of the bus's setup that people fell asleep and often woke up to people accidentally leaning on them. I fell asleep and woke up 40 minutes into the ride and noticed the man who sat down next to me was holding my hand. He was sleeping too, and I laughed to myself, thinking that in his sleep he accidentally held onto me. To avoid making him embarrassed or feeling awkward, I slithered my hand out of his as carefully as possible not to wake him. But as I did, his grip on me tightened and actually started to hurt. He was still sleeping, and we were about 15 to 20 minutes away from our destination. So me being a chicken and scared out my mind, decided to put up with it until we got back to school. When we got back to campus, it was drizzling a bit. So I zoomed off the bus and whipped out my umbrella. But the man from the bus called up to me and asked if he could walk under my umbrella with me. I thought this could no way be a coincidence, as a bunch of other people had umbrellas too that he could have asked as well. But me being naive felt bad because he was wearing a suit and chalked up what happened previously to a misunderstanding. We walked under my umbrella, and literally the first thing he asked was my age. I told him, and he began to tell me he was getting his master's in some kind of math field that sounded complicated, and I didn't remember what it was in. He then asked me for my number, but I politely declined and told him that I didn't give that away to strangers. Get this. He then tells me, "I don't want your number to call or chat with you. I just want a friendship, that's all. Friendship." Big nope from me. If you don't want my number for chatting with me, then what's the point? I was super weirded out, and by this time we approached a large bridge. A few really skinny stray dogs were on it, and the guy then pulls me into a hug with him and starts shrieking. I shove him, and he apologizes and said he's scared of dogs. At this point, I'm even more terrified and just really want him gone. But as we're about to part ways, he tells me that his phone isn't working and has an emergency he needs to make. Me being very stupid, hands him mine, and he proceeds to call himself. His phone starts ringing in his pocket, and he looks at me with a chilling grin and says, "Hey, now I got your number." I ended up filing a police report, and the super understanding officer helped me big time and banned him from taking the buses, as well as placed a no contact order between us. I thought maybe I was overreacting during this process, but after the detective read me the other guy's statement, I knew I did the right thing. He confirmed my story and said everything I claimed was true. He also said something along the lines of, "Yes, I was aware that I was holding her while we were sleeping. I had no idea she didn't want me to do that, since she never said anything." Well, I was sleeping, dude. How would I? He went on to say, "In my country, it's normal to marry younger girls, so I didn't think there was a problem. Buddy? Just no. Maybe he was just confused about customs or something, but I feel better talking about this and hoping I don't offend anyone. Thank you, creep. Let's never meet again." When I was around 16, I was coming home from the south of France to London via coach. It was an overnight trip, and I've always struggled to sleep when traveling. So sometime in the middle of the night, I'm sat there awake while the passengers slept. I was sitting towards the back of the bus, just behind the stairs to the toilet, but on the opposite side. I happened to glance over towards the stairs and saw two figures looking out of the window. The thing is, and I know this sounds crazy, they were level with the floor of the bus. But where they stood, they should have been about 3 feet lower with the level of the bus. The figures were what I can only describe as ghostly, and although I didn't see their face, I felt like they were female. I also got a sense that they were sad, and maybe from a period of time of the past. I can't explain how or why I could feel this, and over the years I've tried to rationalize what I saw. I know for sure I didn't fall asleep, but I can't explain it. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts or an afterlife or anything like that. I do wonder though whether perhaps someone died on that stretch of road. Of course, no one believes me, but I know what I saw, and it was pretty creepy. I take the bus a lot, and we've met all manner of people, from loud and obnoxious to quiet and lewd and cruel and polite and sweet. I'm disabled and have a service dog who is honestly the sweetest thing to ever walk on 4 paws. She's a Labrador mix called Raven. Now my service dog Raven completely ignores most people and barely acknowledges the existence of the rest. And that's good. That's honestly very good. But today, for some reason, she made a sound out of her face that I've never heard from her before. It sounded like a woo woo woo. It wasn't a bark, as her bark is very pronounced, and it wasn't a howl. There was this exceedingly creepy dude that was muttering to himself that came over to stand with us at the bus stop to wait for the bus. He was just mumbling, no earbuds, no headphones, no anything. He sat in the cold snow right next to where Raven had just urinated, and he sat beside it. He walked in circles, kicked over a few cans, all the while mumbling quietly to himself. Throughout all of that nonsense, Raven ignored him, right up until he started to approach me on my deaf side. And then she turned on her head towards him and made this little woo 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 noise, not loud or vicious, or anything like a normal dog would do. She stood there by my side, turned her head to look at him, and continued making that noise. And when I looked back at him, he backpedaled. Now she did this every time he tried to approach me, and right up until the bus came, and she stopped, and we got on. And then the creepy dude got on too. But she didn't make it again once we'd got on the bus. Thankfully, I haven't seen him since, but quite honestly, I wouldn't want to meet him again. A number of years ago, I was taking an overnight bus between two states. I had a job interview in the morning and was going to get to my hotel relatively early in order for me to freshen up and go. I was very nervous and couldn't sleep. Everyone had their little curtain closed, and it was just me with my little reading light trying to go through my notes and memorize what I was going to say. I was sweating bullets. I'm generally a nervous person and don't like being in these situations, but career progression meant a lot to me, and I knew I needed to embrace this in order to get a better paid job. I looked out the window for some time, contemplating my fate, which is when I saw it. I saw a blur run past the bus, faster than the bus. I rubbed my eyes a little. Surely there was nothing going faster than this bus. I mean, the Greyhound wasn't by any means the fastest vehicle on the road. But how could something overtake us? I rubbed my eyes again. I knew I was imagining it. And just as I looked down at my paper, my window curtain was open, and I just glanced out for a minute when we zoomed past a wolf-like creature standing up on both legs, standing on the side of the road. I tilt my head as we pass it, and I see it for an instant standing there with this huge toothy grin. It took a couple of seconds to register what I had seen, and by the time I realized I had seen something paranormal, did I look back again and it was gone. Far too far in the distance for me to see it. Was I crazy? Or was I seeing something unexplainable? Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. If of course you did, don't forget to let me know in the comment section down below. And as I said at the start of the video, feel free to check out that awesome text scary stories app, which you can find a link to in the description. Only available in the Play Store for now. It is really fun. So yeah, bus story is pretty fun. As I was reading the story, there was that comment in one of them about the guy that got attacked and eaten on the Greyhound bus. Horrific. I completely forgotten about that, but then when I read it, I was like, my gosh, that was true. That's a really, really horrible bus story. You guys should, you can look it up if you want. It's chilling to say the least. Poor guy. Imagine being killed and eaten on the bus. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to do the normal stuff. And as always, a huge thanks to my incredible and wonderful patrons whose names are on screen. And if you'd like your name on screen, feel free to check out my link to Patreon. For as little as $1 every month, you can to help support the channel. It really helps me and it is appreciated tremendously. In any case, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.